Welcome this morning to the House Government Operation and Military Affairs Committee. We are here on this Wednesday, January 18th, and we're going to begin our morning with a presentation from Legislative Council, introduction and overview to our jurisdiction on that covers liquor and lottery and Department of Liquor Control. We also have the Commissioner of the department here today with some of the staff, and so I'm looking forward to learning about this new policy area for the Gov.Ops committee as the jurisdictions of our committees have changed this biennium. So I'd like to welcome Tucker Anderson from Legislative Council, who's going to give us the brief overview of our jurisdiction, I believe, and a little bit of history.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Office of Legislative Council. Thank you so much for having me here this morning to give you a brief overview of liquor and lottery, and then a very short introduction of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. And it was my understanding that I should come here this morning to answer a few questions. How did we get here and why is really the big picture objective of what I'm going to do this morning. Same questions my wife asked me when the dogs mess up the house. How did we get here and why? So I'll give you the annoying Tucker-like historical background first, and I'll try to keep it to 2 minutes, but I think it's fascinating and I think it's really helpful to understanding how you get to Vermont's control state model. And the annoying background starts with a brief snarky description, which is that we have a long and complicated history with alcohol in this country. And the long and complicated history is that starting in the mid-19th century, there was a massive political movement called the Women's Temperance Movement. And there's a character that really summarizes what that movement was all about. Her name was Carrie a Nation. That was the name she gave herself in her adult life. And she started going around with rocks and a sling. And she would go into bars and saloons, and she would smash the cash register, smash all the liquor in the stores and the bar, sling rocks at people until they left. And then she got a hatchet and she went through 30 hatchetations, is what it was called. She would go around Kansas, again, smashing bottles, destroying the products, and making it so that, quote, men would go home to their families. And that's kind of where it all started. We eventually had a president who did not drink and who was on the side of the temperance movement. That was Abraham Lincoln. And later the movement would gain a lot of strength, and the federal government would do something completely unprecedented when it comes to a commercial product. They would adopt the Webb-Kenyon Act, which essentially let go of federal control over interstate commerce when it came to one product: alcoholic beverages. And it allowed the states to adopt prohibitions on the manufacture and sale of alcohol. This would later lead to, in 1919, following the end of World War I, the adoption of the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which was prohibition. Prohibition would stay in place for 14 years. There would be extended legal battles over it, the rise of the jazz movement, and in 1933, eventually the end of that experiment, which was the adoption of the 21st Amendment. Now, I could not find a copy of just the U.S. Constitution, but I did bring, like Betsy Ann back in the day, a demonstrative aid to say, whenever I'm going to do a presentation, an overview of this sort, that we start from the top. And the U.S. Constitution controls somewhere in this volume. And under the 21st Amendment, the manufacture, sale, or transportation into any state, territory, or possession of the United States for delivery or use manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereof into or the exportation thereof from the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverage purposes is to be controlled by the states. States have jurisdiction over alcoholic beverages. And what's fascinating about the way that the clauses of the 21st Amendment stack is that it's one of only two ways that a private individual acting in their individual capacity can violate the United States Constitution. The other way is slavery. So everything else, of course, relates just to how government interacts with a private individual. While the 21st Amendment granted states the authority to regulate the importation of alcoholic beverages into the states, this state power is still balanced against other constitutional provisions. So take, for example, the Commerce Clause, which is something that you're going to come across a lot when discussing alcoholic beverages. Or how about the First Amendment, compelled speech, when we talk about labeling on alcoholic beverages or advertising. Next level down, federal law. Federal law governing alcoholic beverages is largely codified in one U.S. title and in a set of regulations adopted by what is known as the Tax and Trade Bureau. Those regulations are somewhat discrete when we talk about the massive universe of alcoholic beverages, and they largely relate to labeling, food additive contents in certain alcoholic beverages, and then deceptive trade practices and certain advertising requirements. Perhaps the largest area that the states feel the impact of federal law, and this is not anything that supersedes state law, but if you want to get federal highway funds, you have to set your drinking age at 21 years of age, and that is federal law. So then we move on to Vermont law, which is where you're going to be dabbling occasionally throughout your time on this committee. Vermont's alcoholic beverage laws are completely contained in Title VII. And I did send in a primer. You can go through some of the general descriptions of how Title VII is laid out, but I wanted to do a couple quick hits that come up over and over and over again. The first concept that you need to know heading into alcoholic beverage regulation is that you have defined beverage categories. And this is common to every jurisdiction that has ever regulated alcoholic beverages. The very first consumer protection law ever adopted in the Western world was known as the Reinheitsgebot. And it was a definition of what beer is. And if you deviated from the definition of what beer was, you could not sell it in the market. And that's because too many people were getting poisoned or inadvertently being dosed with hallucinogenics by the addition of wormwood into beer. So also have what are known as purity laws for our alcoholic beverage definitions. The ones you want to keep in mind as we separate them: malt beverages, beers; vinous beverages, wines and fruit products broadly, including ciders, which has a separate definition, but is included within vinous beverages broadly, with some minor exceptions; fortified wines, which are vinous beverages to which spirits have been added and are between 16 and 23% alcohol by volume; ready to drink spirits beverages; and finally, spirits. Federal law, for purposes of labeling and taxation, has a few other categories, but those are what we have under Vermont law. Another thing to keep in mind is that Title VII relates to beverage alcohol. And that is, again, because that is what the 21st Amendment has said is within state power: the importation of alcoholic beverages for use as a beverage. You have to have an administrative agency, and that's the next big picture thing that I wanted to outline for you. After Prohibition, states went in two directions. Well, we'll say three. They either maintained Prohibition or they went in one of two commercial directions. The first was to legalize the sale of alcoholic beverages, potentially have a regulatory agency, but to by and large allow this product to move as other products do through the private market. Then there were control states. and there are quite a few of them, including Vermont. And control states allowed only the state as an entity to distribute and sell alcoholic beverages. Currently, Vermont's control state applies to spirits and fortified wines. The Department of Liquor and Lottery is the exclusive authority for the distribution and sale of those two products within the state of Vermont. Malt beverages, vinous beverages, ciders, ready-to-drink spirits beverages move through private distribution channels. The Department of Liquor and Lottery, therefore, has kind of a dual role and dual personality in state government. It is simultaneously the administrative authority that licenses manufacturers and retailers in the state, but it is also a retailer. It is a business, an enterprise that controls those two products, spirits and fortified wines. Taxes is another thing I wanted to highlight because it often gets confusing when dealing with alcoholic beverage revenue, where it's coming from and where it's going. So I wanted to quickly highlight the tax structure. Malt beverages, vinous beverages, ciders, and ready-to-drink spirits beverages are subject to a gallonage tax. For every gallon of that particular alcoholic beverage that is produced by a manufacturer, they have to pay a 26.5 cent, 55 cent, or $1.10 per gallon tax, depending on the beverage category that their product falls in. Then there's an excise tax, which is 5% and is applied to spirits and fortified wines. You pay the gallonage tax to the Department of Taxes. You pay the excise tax to the Department of Liquor and Lottery. That's the primary level. Then you have revenue share, which is, of course, because you have a state enterprise that controls the sale and distribution of spirits and fortified wines. They get a cut. They get a pretty large cut. And the Department of Liquor and Lottery, because it is selling these beverages, gets the markup above whatever the retail wholesale list price that they get from the manufacturer. Then there is sales tax, which does apply to alcoholic beverages and is applied both at the state level and potentially at the local level if there is a local option tax in the particular municipality where the sale takes place. Sales tax goes to the education fund. Pretty much everything else is going to go to the general fund, either directly, but through the tax collection, or in the case of the revenue share, eventually through a direct application or appropriation that is done by the General Assembly from DLL's enterprise fund to the general fund. Did you follow all of the strings on the board as I was pinning them along to show you the state's tax scheme around this? Great. I can tell from the glazed eyes.
In all seriousness, Representative Hooper, I knew we would have some questions here.
What's the alcohol? Is it an alcohol content or what that defines the ready to drink or whatever that category was below the fortified?
It is a alcohol content, but it is also that it is spirits based. And I skipped right past this when I talked about the beverage categories because I didn't know how in-depth the committee wanted to get. But the beverage categories, starting at the primary level, are separated by how the alcohol is derived in the manufacturing process. So pretty much everything except for spirits is derived through zymergy, which is broadly known as fermentation. If you are fermenting sugars and turning it into alcohol, it's going to fall into one of those beverage categories. And then we have further separation for what the basis is, fruit versus malts, what have you. If you are deriving the alcohol through concentration, distillation, or freezing, then it is a spirit. regardless of its alcohol content. However, if you are taking a spirit and adding it to, let's say, a soda and putting it in a can and it is less than 12% alcohol by volume, then it is a ready-to-drink spirits beverage.
Samples.
I do not bring samples, no.
Well, the fortified wines though are wine with spirits, so that's
Yes.
yeah, as well.
Fortified wines are a combination of vinous beverages, including vermouths, and spirits, which is why some of the canned ale world might get a little confusing with the current definitions, because if you add vermouth to your ready-to-drink spirits beverage, I think it is an open question under the law whether that is a fortified wine or a ready-to-drink spirits beverage.
Question from Representative Murwicky.
I've heard from a number of restaurant owners that Vermont's system is such that they have to buy their alcohol through a certified distributor. Is there a history to that, or?
So the way that, yes, there's a history. And I did outline for the beer, wine, and now ready-to-drink spirits beverages in this that there are franchise agreements with distributors under Vermont law for those beverages. So that's part of that background. The franchise statutes have changed quite a bit just over the last 4 to 6 years. So if you want a breakdown of how franchise agreements for the distribution of malts, vinous, and ready-to-drink spirits beverages, I would be happy to set that out for you. And the other thing to keep in mind is that all of those restaurants, if they want to get spirits or fortified wines and they have a third-class license, need to go through the Department of Liquor and Lottery to acquire those.
We can follow up later. Thanks.
I would encourage everyone on the committee to read the document carefully that Tucker gave us, which is a very helpful overview and will probably spark a lot of questions that we can either take in further testimony or folks can ask Tucker and some of the folks who I believe will be testifying after this. We also have a couple members of last biennium's House General Committee who come with some policy experience in this area. So this is just our first introduction and overview to our liquor and lottery jurisdiction today. And I know there'll be lots and lots of questions. So Tucker, thank you for doing this. Yes, Representative Hango.
Thank you. I have a suggestion. I don't know if it's for Tucker or the commissioner or both, the department. I think having worked with this subject area for 4 years, a chart or a series of charts that give a visual picture of what's included in each category might be a little more powerful than words on a page. Thanks.
We have many charts and I will send them all to the committee after this, both for the beverage categories, but also for something I didn't dig into, which is the 3-tier system in Vermont, which gets very confusing very quickly what the exceptions are, and for the applicable tied house provisions around corporate ownership within the 3-tier system. I'll send all that along. The last things that I wanted to touch on, because there is more than just alcohol in the Department of Liquor and Lottery, there's also a lottery. Broadly, Vermont prohibits gambling as criminal conduct. That's the default rule. And there's a few tiny exceptions to that default rule, but the one big exception is the state lottery. And the Department of Liquor and Lottery, through the Board of Liquor and Lottery, is authorized in Title 31 to operate a state lottery, to participate in multi-jurisdictional lotteries, and to be a part of the Tri-State Lottery Compact. And that is how you get all of the lottery tickets and scratchers and other products that you see sold through lottery agents who are agents of the Department of Liquor and Lottery that are authorized to sell those tickets. So it's another aspect of that control model that Vermont has adopted for some of these products. I did outline at the end of this the structure of the Department of Liquor and Lottery and the Board of Liquor and Lottery. It's important to kind of just at a very high level remember some of the distinctions in the administrative agencies between the more legislative bodies within a department and then the enforcement and administration arm. So you have the Board of Liquor and Lottery, which consists of 5 members. Got it. And then you have the Commissioner of Liquor and Lottery, who is essentially both the chief enforcement officer for the department, but also is running the enterprise, is in charge of running the business aspects of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. Hope that was helpful.
And Higley has a question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I have to ask Tucker, I noticed that your water is in a mason jar.
Yes.
And when I was in Mississippi, moonshine came in a mason jar. Is there a statement that you're trying to make here or just an observation?
The statement was that I was thirsty and rushing out of my office, and this is my very grody mason jar that I have had for all 6 years that I've been here, and I have washed 3 times. So we're coming up on a biennial washing very soon.
I love that we have that right there.
One interesting thing that I wanted to mention is that there are still prohibitionist territories in Vermont. And I figured I had a few minutes left, so I just wanted to mention that local control is an aspect of how Vermont's control state model works. There are 4 municipalities that altogether prohibit the sale of alcohol and do not participate in Vermont's alcoholic beverage market broadly. Athens, Baltimore, Holland, and Maidstone. And about 1/10 of Vermont's municipalities, maybe a little less, have some sort of semi-dry aspect to them because they do not allow the sale of spirits or fortified wines. And all of this was done by local ballot initiative required in Title VII. Municipalities had to vote to permit the sale of alcohol. And they made different decisions over the period following Prohibition. And there's at least one in almost every county. I think the only counties that do not have at least one dry town are Grand Isle, Franklin County, Chittenden County, and Windsor.
Any other big overview questions for Tucker before we move on? All right, Tucker, thank you very much. I did not find that annoying at all. I am fascinated by this, but I'm a geek about many things. I will also say that Chair Stevens shared a few copies of a book called Toward Liquor Control. The original was written in 1933. I cannot believe how relevant it is to thinking about these issues still today. There are a few copies here behind me. I started reading it over the last week and fascinated by that. And so with that, I will now welcome Commissioner Wendy Knight. And if you want to have anybody from your team up with you, I'll kind of let you drive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, Wendy Knight. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. Good to meet you all. I'm excited that Liquor and Lottery is with this committee, and I look forward to working with you over the next several months. By way of background, I was appointed by the governor as Deputy Commissioner of the department in April 2021. I was then promoted to Commissioner in December. I was his first Tourism and Marketing Commissioner from 17 to 19. I'm also a board member of the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance and a commissioner of the Vermont Commission on Women. And I live in Panton, and Representative Byrong is my legislator.
We're sorry.
So Tucker, thank you for that great history. So we've now established that alcohol and gambling are legal activities for adults in Vermont, and that's regulated by Title VII and Title 31. We also regulate tobacco. So we are, everyone refers to us as Vice. I like to say booze, bets, and butts. That's the Department of Liquor and Lotteries. We have about 80 employees. Our appropriation this year is 14 million. That is just our one set of appropriations. Our total appropriations, we have a demand driven budget because we are two businesses. So the Department of Liquor and Lottery has a unique position in that it is a state agency that's running two businesses. Those are two enterprise funds, they call them. So the Division of Liquor Control is an enterprise fund and Vermont Lottery is an enterprise fund. In 2018, they had been separate departments, and the legislature decided to merge them and passed a law to have the liquor and lottery divisions become one department. So essentially, we are functioning now as one department. We haven't really been since 2018. It was one of the charges that I was given by the governor is to fully integrate the department and reorganize based on operational function. So we started that about a year ago. Prior to that, all of the reporting structure, all the budget, all the finances were up through Vermont Lottery and the Division of Liquor Control. So we reorganized in April, and we have our two senior directors that are going to speak in a little bit. We have an integrated team. So we have lottery and liquor teams within that integrated organization. It also means that we are moving appropriations from 5 different historical appropriations to 1 appropriation. Still 2 separate enterprise funds, but because we're an integrated department, our business offices are integrated, invoices are integrated, splitting the teams are integrated, so it's completely integrated, and we can talk more about that. So as Tucker mentioned, we are a control state, so that means that the Department of Liquor Control and the Division of Liquor Control is the sole distributor of distilled spirits. We are a business in a sense, right? So we are, if you're an 802 Spirits, if you're a bar or restaurant, you come to the 802 Spirits store to buy your alcohol. So much of what we'll talk about in a little bit in terms of some of the practices that we've done over the last year or so, or initiatives are meant to make us that business unit more customer friendly and business friendly. So we have that split mission, right? And this is in our mission statement. We are very much about the responsible sale and consumption. And so we're making money for the state by selling tobacco, selling lottery tickets, and selling alcohol. So on the liquor side, last year we have had about $100 million in sales. 20 million of that was a direct application to the general fund. So the liquor contributes 20 million to the general fund, and on the lottery side, we had 150 million in sales, and that is generated money for the ed fund. So that generated $30 million for the ed fund. So clearly we have a public safety component of our mission. We want people to play gaming responsibly. We want people to consume responsibly, and we have those messages throughout. And then we obviously want to generate sales because we're operating businesses, raise money for the state. So it's a little bit of a unique mission. And what we talk about internally is that each of us in the department needs to embrace that sort of dual kind of mission. And Skylar and Danielle will talk a little bit about the different units or divisions that we have within the department. What I wanted to do is then come back and we can sort of, I want to leave lots of time for questions, but I want to talk a little bit about some of our business initiatives, some of our legislative initiatives. We do have a legislative newsletter that we started last summer, and I can have all of you sign up for that. That will give you those visuals. Representative Hango that you talked about, we try to provide infographics because it's complicated. We are, wanting to be available to make it easier for you to understand throughout the session. I am always available. You can always reach out to me if you have questions. Charles Martin is our new legislative and communications director. You'll get his contact information. And if I could, Mr. Chair, I would like to have Skylar Janess and Danielle Jensen, our two senior directors, give a little bit of overview of our licensee operations and our agency operations.
Yeah, before that, any high-level questions for Commissioner Knight?
You'll have lots of them, and that's fine. I'm here. I'm available.
The one I wanted to touch on that I think Tucker glossed over a little bit was that in the history of, I would say, all of these areas, one of the things that didn't work with prohibition that I think you're charged with is sort of being an alternative to the kind of organized crime and sort of controlling some of the things. I think the number one thing you'll read if you read that Port Liquor Control book that has to do with the fact that during prohibition, the rise and the violence associated with organized crime was one of the key reasons some of those folks who had been in favor of the prohibition supported the control state policy. But is that a fair characterization?
That's a fair characterization. I'm not a historian, but yeah, for sure. I also think what's interesting is that Lake Champlain was part of the illegal. Yes. Yes. So I think there's a fascinating history right here as well. So, I mean, a control state, the theory behind a control state is that, after prohibition, you still wanted to have controls on distilled spirits, right? You still wanted to limit the number of outlets. And so that's what we operate right now. So there's the control state model, which means that the state is we are the only ones that you can buy out distilled spirits from. And we are the only ones that you can, distribute it. And then there's the three-tier model that Tucker talked about. And that's basically you have the manufacturers, the suppliers, they are making the alcohol. And then you have the wholesalers, right? And in beer and wine, we have wholesalers. So you have the distributors. And then you have the retailers. So if you're a retailer, you need to buy from the wholesaler who buys from the supplier. On the distilled spirit side, we are that wholesaler. So, and Danielle will talk a little bit about our retail network, but we still have the same three-tiered system. We're the wholesaler and we're the retailer through a contractual relationship.
Representative Ricky.
Thank you for all this, and thanks for coming in today.
Of course.
I don't need an answer right now, but I think as a follow-up to my previous question about our local restaurants, the challenge for them is when they buy beer or wine, they get it delivered. They don't have to go out, but if they want to buy spirits, they have to be the one. And I don't know if there's any distribution of that in the state or if it's allowed.
So Representative, can you tell me how I pronounce your last name? Rebecca?
In English or Polish?
Polish.
Brawicki.
Brawicki.
That's cool.
Us? Okay. So the question is, bars and restaurants are purchasing from wholesalers. Wholesalers deliver to the bars and the restaurants, right? So on the 802 Spirits side, what happens is the bars and the restaurants literally must walk into the 802 Spirits store, just like any walk-in customer, and buy their product at the same price of any walk-in customer, which to me is ludicrous, right? It makes no sense. Again, getting back to if you're going to be in the business of operating a business, you need to be more business friendly. So some of the things we're doing is we're changing that a little bit to be more supportive of the bars and the restaurants. The 802 Spirit stores can contract with a delivery service to deliver to the bars and the restaurants. And some of them do, for example, in Burlington, I know that happens. So we don't have a delivery mechanism, we being the department, for 802 Spirit stores to deliver to the bars and the restaurants.
So there's no prohibition.
There's no prohibition to have a delivery service? Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we can talk now or a little bit about some of the things we're doing in terms of making it more affordable and business friendly for the bars and the restaurants. We have an on-premise sales program. We're launching a B2B website, so I can get into that in a little bit, but.
Just one thing to add to that, I mean, just a newly implemented rule by the department that bars and restaurants can use a credit card to buy alcohol. They used to have to bring a check or cash.
Correct. Historically,
Archaic, yeah.
yeah, there was the thought that using the use of a credit card was deemed credit. Our regulations don't allow the use of credit, extending credit. But the use of a credit card, the board clarified that that doesn't mean extending credit. The credit card company is extending the credit, but the department is not extending the credit. So we've clarified that. Thank you for that, Representative Lyra. Pardon me?
Venmo?
Venmo. I like where you're going. So if I could pause for a minute and have Danielle Jensen is our Senior Director of Agency Operations, talk a little bit about the lottery operations and the liquor operations.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. So on the lottery side of the house, we have 570 active lottery agents in Vermont. The network of these agents are made up in grocery stores, pharmacies, convenience stores, both chain and independents. All agents sell an array of lottery products that include instant tickets, which most people call scratchers, national lottery games such as Powerball and Mega Millions and Lucky for Life. And as mentioned prior, we do have a partnership with Maine and New Hampshire that is called the Tri-State Lottery. And that partnership allows the 3 states to partner to bring together instant games, megabucks, fast play games, Give Me 5, and our Pick 3 and Pick 4 games. Agents on the lottery side receive commissions of 6% on their Powerball, Mega Millions, and Lucky for Life sales, and 5 3/4% commission on all their other lottery products. These commissions are paid weekly, and they're paid via the agent's weekly invoice. That's basically how we either debit or credit the agent for whether they owe the lottery money for that week or whether we owe them money for that week. Agents are also receive a 1% selling bonus for selling winning tickets of at least $500. And that selling bonus does cap out at $30,000. Total commissions paid to our agents in FY22 was $9.1 million. In October, on the lottery side, we did launch our new gaming system and with a new vendor, and that vendor is Scientific Games. This is a 10-year, $150 million contract that'll improve our player and agent experience. It's a much more modern system and has much better reporting capabilities for agents. The lottery on the business side has many vendors that help us in many different ways. Games operates the system and our back office system that our employees use. And Games also runs the platform for our warehouse software, our agent portal, and our online subscription portal, which is where players can go and buy a 3-month, 6-month, or 12-month subscription to their favorite Powerball, Mega Millions, or Megabucks. And so we also have a vendor named Pollard Banknote that produces our instant tickets and helps our team with the design and the odds of those tickets. Pollard also operates our Second Chance Lottery platform. And what that is that if with instant tickets or scratchers, if that's not a winning ticket, players can create an account and then enter their non-winning ticket for a second chance at winning on that ticket. Just a warehousing highlight for the lottery side. The lottery warehouse staff packed and shipped almost 350 instant ticket books with only 2 team members. 30,000 orders were fulfilled and shipped to agents with 100% daily completion rate and with less than a 1% error rate. Now I'm just going to move over to the liquor side. So in FY '22, there were 80 Vermont liquor agents. Liquor agents receive a base commission of 6.5% with increases of 1.7% if they fulfill certain criteria that's set forth by our retail operations director and the retail coordinating team. Agent commissions in FY '22 on the liquor side were 8.7 million, which was a 6.8% increase over FY '21. And in FY '22, the department brought in 200 new products, including 28 Vermont-made products. And just a warehousing highlight on the liquor side, the liquor warehouse team picked and loaded nearly 500,000 cases of spirits in FY '22, all within a 30,000 square foot space, which is filled to the rafters at this point. The volume of cases represents a 4% increase from the previous year. So that just gives you a little background on what the operations team does and some of the numbers and some of our successes for FY '22.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Jensen? One question I had was if there's any data or information that we could look at that's about sort of the demographics and the number of Vermonters who are participating in the games, if there's a past report or anything like that. That was just a general question that I had.
I'll be honest, our reporting capabilities are much better now than they have been in the past, but we do have some demographic information that we could certainly get to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Skylar, do you want to give an overview of the licensing operations?
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Skylar Janess. I'm the Senior Director of Licensee Operations for the Department of Liquor and Lottery. I've been with the department for 10 years. I started as a liquor control investigator and was elevated to Senior Director just a few months ago. Licensee Operations is encompassed by 4 major offices. First is our Office of Licensing and Customer Service. This office directly deals with our licensee partners in the communities that you represent. Any given day, there's around 7,000 active licenses and permits, and our Office of Licensing ensures that they are able to obtain and maintain those licenses as needed as efficiently as possible. The second office is our Office of Education. Under rules regulated by and statutes promulgated under Title VII, all sellers and servers of regulated products, be it tobacco or beverage alcohol, are required to obtain training on that responsible sale every 2 years in the state. We have around 38,000 trained individuals at any given time engaging in the sales of those regulated products, and they receive what I believe to be a very high caliber level of training offered by our department. The next office is our Office of Compliance and Enforcement. This is a team of level 3 certified law enforcement officers that really facilitate public safety in regards to beverage, alcohol, and tobacco products in 3 key areas. They do that through a minor compliance program where we send underage individuals into establishments with all hopes of our licensees doing the right thing and refusing a sale to those minors. Generally, our compliance is relatively high for both alcohol and tobacco. Somewhere around 90% of all compliance checks pass, meaning our licensees carry out the training that they received. They ask for a satisfactory ID for those individuals and they refuse sales. The remaining 10% that do fail, they receive a healthy dose of all of the services that my team offers, whether that is assistance with education or retraining. It could be compliance assistance with our Office of Compliance and Enforcement. And as a means of last resort, enforcement is an option that our department can enact. The second bucket that the team of compliance and enforcement operates in is a regulatory inspection model. This is a way that we can monitor compliance levels at our licensees across the state. We do that by either announced or unannounced visits to establishments where we look for everything as minute as a proper license hanging on the wall or it could be as in-depth as a full business audit. And the goal for that, those visits are always compliant. We're always seeking ways to ensure that our licensees have all of the information, all of the best practices at their fingertips so that they can operate their businesses the most effectively and with high regard for public safety. The last bucket is investigations. As level 3 sworn law enforcement officers, we will engage and do regularly engage in criminal investigations when crimes occur in and around licensed liquor establishments. This can run a wide spectrum of crimes, as you would imagine. It could be everything from the unlawful sale of those products to as serious as aggravated assaults or homicides that can occur in licensed establishments. We believe that those 3 key programs provide the highest level of public safety while still maintaining that balance that Commissioner Knight spoke about of ensuring that our businesses, our partners, as we like to view them, have all the tools that they need to be successful. The last office within the Office of Licensee Operations would be our lottery security. The lottery industry is a highly technical industry, and we want to ensure that all efforts are made to maintain the integrity and fair play of our lottery systems. So we do that through with the aid of quite a bit of technology, but we also have dedicated staff that ensure internal controls are maintained to again maintain that internal integrity of those systems. Big highlights for the licensee operations side of the house that I'd like the committee to be aware of is just recently, within the last 3 months, we have migrated away from an all paper-based application system, which had a back-end licensing system that was developed before I was born. We recently transferred that system to a fully online web-based platform, which is really encompasses all of the licensee operation functions, from applying for and renewing licenses to seeking training and obtaining training to even addressing compliance enforcement related matters, all within one website. My favorite metric to share and success story to share is prior to this move, we told licensees they could expect their license anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks from the time that we received that paper application in hand. Currently, the system's turnaround time from the date of creation of the application in the system to the issuance of their license is no more than 8 days on average. This system facilitates online payment, is very user-friendly, is much more accessible, and we think it's a really big improvement for the services that the department can offer.
So I think we have several people who have owned a business that was a licensee on the committee, including me in a past life. And so that 8 days sounds really incredible to me. So appreciate that focus on customer service. Do folks have questions for Skylar? Mr. Higley?
This may be for the commissioner, but I was interested, there was some spirits manufacturers during the height of the pandemic that created alcohol hand wash.
Yes.
Is that regulated through you folks or through the Ag Department? Or was there any regulation at all?
I don't know. That would be a question for Skylar. I wasn't the commissioner at that point. I don't think. I don't even know the answer. Skylar?
Yeah, I certainly was with the department. We do issue industrial alcohol manufacturing permits. We were able to turn around, I believe it was 9 industrial alcohol permits when we have historically issued about 2 a year. We issued 9 in about the span of 3 days to respond to the pandemic. It was one of our, we were pleased to help general public health in doing so and getting those converted from beverage alcohol manufacturers to, for short periods of time, industrial alcohol manufacturers.
Thank you for that.
See, I learned something too, every day.
So one place where our other area of jurisdiction around municipal government and your work, Commissioner and Skylar, interacts is with the local liquor control boards. Could you talk a little bit about sort of how the information gets to the locals and the interplay there, just for folks who are uninitiated? I'm on the city council. I know we have at least a couple of folks with select board experience here who've been on the local liquor control boards, but I think that's a good context setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Skylar can talk about that because that process has improved immensely with the online licensing portal. Skylar, you want to talk about the local control process?
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner. So local control is integral to the department. there are a number of licenses that we issue that actually require local control approval before the state will even take action on those applications. Those are our major licenses. Those are our first and third. So those are our on-premise malt and vinous, as well as our on-premise spirits licenses. Those are bars, restaurants, eateries, things of that nature. Also our second class licenses. So those are our off-premise licenses that sell to-go malt and vinous beverages need local control approval. Lastly, there are a whole cadre of events that involve beverage alcohol. There are limited in duration, and they may be applied for and put on by Vermont manufacturers. They could be just members of the public, but those events also need local control approval. The way that works is a municipality has the ability to form a local liquor control board who has some Title VII authority in terms of issuing and conditioning licenses. A lot of that is cruxed upon the ability to enact municipal ordinances or zoning regulations in those local controls. And therefore it can be a bit of a patchwork and myriad of how that works across the state. But generally, all of our state issued applications are populated on forms by the department, which is now an online form. They are electronically now transferred to a town clerk in any municipality that is where a licensee is seeking an application that requires local control. That application drops into their online portal. The local control can convene. They can hear facts and circumstances around this application, and they can ultimately make a decision to approve, deny, or condition. Once that happens, then the application kind of moves on to the next step to the state, where the state will begin its issuance process. Local control used to be the one issue that we believe to be important, but slowed down our application process considerably, because generally the method that was facilitated was by U.S. mail or hand carrying to our office those applications from a town clerk to our office in Montpelier. Now it's 3 mouse clicks and we can get access to those approved applications once actioned on by local control.
I know that St. Albans City Council has met in order to approve these remotely as well, and taking advantage of the authority that we all just voted to extend for a couple more years. So that's another part of our kind of using the technology to expedite the licensing but maintain the local control. So something for the committee to think about, how the different work that we're doing that doesn't always seem related is intimately related. Any other questions about licensing, compliance? One question I had for Skylar, or area that we might talk about now or later, was just about how many, you talked about the level 3 law enforcement officers that are part of the department. They all get trained at the academy. We're going to be hearing from the Criminal Justice Council, I think later today, a little bit more about how we train law enforcement officers and maintain certification in Vermont. So if you could speak to just the specialization, the training, who are those folks, and are you experiencing some of the same staffing issues around having law enforcement officers that other agencies are in the state?
Happy to. Yes. So by statute, liquor investigators are required to be level 3 certified law enforcement officers as certified by the Criminal Justice Council. Historically, we have never sent any new hires to the academy to obtain that certification. We have historically hired prior certified law enforcement officers to facilitate this job. And the reason for that is a bit myriad. One, there is a specific investigative skill set that is developed after some time as a law enforcement officer. So that's obviously of benefit to the department to capitalize on an already developed skill set. Two, our department wears 2 hats, if you will. So not only are we level 3 sworn law enforcement officers, we are regulators. So we perform a regulatory function as well. And that is a lot for a brand new police officer to kind of absorb and digest, to learn as a first step of their job. Having started my police career on a campus police department, learning the ins and outs of enforcing criminal law is enough of a challenge for a young police officer, let alone then lumping on top of that, learning the complexities of a very old but very thorough regulatory framework around beverage alcohol. So there's been a lot of upside for us to hire prior sworn law enforcement officers. We are a small team. There are total, including 2 administrative personnel, there are only 13 level 3 sworn law enforcement officers assigned to the department. That does include myself. It includes an administrative lieutenant, and the rest are frontline investigators out in the field. We have not had historically a challenge recruiting and retaining these positions. That isn't to say there aren't certainly one-off issues, but generally as a rule of thumb, we haven't expressed the same staffing shortages that other law enforcement entities have struggled with over the last several years.
If I could add, Mr. Chair, we actually have no vacancies at all in the department, which is very unusual for state agencies. So the other thing to add is that our deputy commissioner came from Vermont State Police, Andrew Collier, and he is a certified law enforcement officer as well, doing his certification. So that detail.
Thank you.
And we are also part of the governor's 10-point public safety plan, if you've been hearing about that. He has asked all of the agencies that have law enforcement, that would be DMV, DLL, and Fish and Wildlife, to participate in a collaborative effort with Vermont State Police to share resources, to work collaboratively. The operational team meets weekly. The senior leadership team, which is Commissioner Morrison, myself, Secretary Flynn, Secretary Moore, meet monthly. And the idea is to really, VSP has a problem with vacancies. I think they have 60 vacancies. And so the idea is to figure out how we can be helpful and how the DMV, DLL, Fish and Wildlife can do some of the, the work and transfer some of that workload. So we're very involved in that.
We're going to be hearing from Commissioner Morrison and her team this afternoon.
Great.
So this is a day of public safety introductions. Any other questions for Skylar or Danielle or Commissioner? Is there anything else you'd like to?
Yes, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the business initiatives that we, and I mentioned that a little bit ago with the on the liquor side with the bars and restaurants. So on the lottery side, something to keep in mind is that the sales have been trending down, right? So a year before, of course, during COVID, we had record lottery sales, and we're trending down, still doing okay from 2018, and we can share those numbers with you. We're evaluating what are the price points, what are the tickets. The other thing that are rising, what are the tickets that are trending? What we see generally is that the jackpot games like Powerball and Mega Millions, when the jackpot is high, we sell a lot of tickets. We did have our very first Vermont, if you remember, in the fall, Mega Millions? Danielle, which was Powerball? We had Powerball, thank you. We had a jackpot winner sold from a local agency in Middlebury, and they did get that bonus, the selling bonus that Danielle was talking about. So one of the things that we're doing several things to be mindful of ticket sales going down. One, with this new relationship with Scientific Games, we managed to negotiate some extra vending machines. So we'll have extra vending machines. I think it's 30 that we can put out into our lottery agents to make it easier for our players to purchase the tickets. Now, we all know that worker shortage is a problem in Vermont, no matter what sector, and that's definitely affecting our retailers. It's affecting our 802 Spirit stores as well as our lottery agents. So that will be really helpful for the agents as well as the players. We're also increasing the use of debit cards. Debit cards are not cash. I mean, they're cash, right? So they're okay to use. We're a cash-based system, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of player data, is because people are using using cash. We can't collect the demographics of the lottery players. We're also looking at having more corporate accounts, so establishing relationships with 7-Eleven and Walmarts to sell the Vermont lottery. Problem gambling is something we're looking at a lot. Some of it has been spawned by the focus on sports betting, but internally we have a relationship grant with the Howard Center to address problem gambling. One of the things we're doing is reevaluating that because it's about $125,000 grant, and there are very few referrals. So it's a very reactive approach. It's not a proactive approach. And so we've been talking with the health department and the Department of Mental Health about doing a much more, you need to build awareness. What does problem gambling looks like? What does responsible gaming look like? And reaching out to folks, much like a public health awareness campaign, a consumer education campaign, so that they understand things to look for and then where to get resources. So we're in the process of creating a brand new contract with an RFP that will go out and that will help us with that kind of proactive effort. On the liquor side, we talked about some of the work that we're doing with the bars and the restaurants. I mentioned the on sales program that's designed to give bars and restaurants a discount. We buy the products from the wholesalers, the suppliers, I mean, and that's at a cost of goods, and then we mark it up, and then we have the retail price, which the bars and restaurants have been paying. So we are creating a sales program that's fully funded by the suppliers that gives the bars and the restaurants access to 40 to 60 different products, and the average discount of that is $3 to $4 a bottle. That's the first step of a larger initiative to be much more business friendly and consumer friendly with the bars and the restaurants. Right now we have an RFP out. We received some bids. We're evaluating for what we call a B2B website. This will be for bars and restaurants to go online, find out the products that they want. If there's a certain product that's not available, say Campari, last summer Campari wasn't available, it will populate with the next 3 available products that can replace that. And then it will show them which agency stores, how much the product is available at the agency stores or the warehouse. They can literally go online, create this virtual shopping cart, pay for it, and then either have it delivered through a private delivery service or arrange to pick it up at an 802 Spirit store. Our tentative deadline to launch this was December of this year, 2023, and I just saw the latest that we're hoping to launch it by July. So that will improve the relationship significantly with the bars and the restaurants. The other thing we've launched is a cocktail rack program. So it's meant for the smaller craft distilleries. Vermont products have taken advantage of that. So we've had Vermont companies that have signed on for that. It's a 3-month program. What we do is we select 10 stores and the supplier is part of that. So for example, we just had St. Johnsbury Distillery. So they are displaying a certain product that might be available as a cocktail, that can be used as a mixer, with a mixer. And so we've seen that by highlighting those products in both those 10 stores, we've seen sales increase significantly for those smaller distillers. Part of what that entails is in our 802 Spirits magazine. Of course, I didn't bring it with me. I'll bring it next time. They have a front page cover in that and a feature story. So that's proven to be really successful. And then we are in the process of reevaluating our retail network to select the optimal locations and the optimal partners. So Danielle mentioned we have about 80 stores. Some of those contracted relationships were with a drugstore, for example, a pharmacy. We don't think that's an optimal partner to be selling distilled spirits when in a drugstore. So for us, the optimal partner is a beverage center, a wine store, a grocery store. And so we're in the process of sending a lot of those out to bid. We don't have any more, as far as I remember, any more pharmacy partners. We are also looking at making sure we have ideal locations. Sometimes you have a store that is a mom and pop shop and they're maybe aging out, they want to retire. And so we put those locations out to bid. So we're really in the process of evaluating, the network to make sure that we're choosing those optimal partners because we want to optimize sales. We have a store that is in a, I guess I would call it a tourist community, could be doing really well. And the store owners decided she's too busy with her life or her family and started closing on Saturdays and Friday afternoons. It's like, that's not an optimal partner to have a liquor store closed at Friday at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, on a summer, right? Like, not ideal. So we're just making sure that we have business partners that are going to be good business partners, I guess.
Representative Hooper has.
Yeah.
No, when you're.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to pause. I want to talk a little bit about our legislative priorities, and then I'm available for questions.
Drugstore seems like an optimal place to be selling liquor or drug. What do you anticipate the overall loss of revenue to be when you jump into this discount for?
There's no loss in revenue. The supplier pays for that.
All coming through?
Yeah.
Did you see a decrease in sales based on the changes to the odds in the lottery?
The odds in the lottery?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
added numbers and.
Yeah, I don't know. Danielle, do you have an answer to that question?
I don't think that it did. The decrease really does have anything to do with the odds. I think it really has more to do with having that little extra money to spend while you're at the store.
And speaking of money, money is good on lottery side, credit is good on. Well,
So the regulations so one of the things that I think Tucker talked about a little bit, you not only have laws in Title VII, but then you have regulations and then you have board decisions. So the regulation that exists, prohibiting credit is a regulation. And Skylar, do you have that specific regulation?
It is a set of credit regulations currently, which there is only one, but that is relative to beverage alcohol. I believe the question, and maybe I misunderstood, is this relative to lottery play and use of credit cards for lottery play?
or ATM. It just seems like my local vendor anyway, it's cash.
Yeah, actually Danielle may be best poised to answer the question about prohibition of credit cards for lottery play.
Yeah, we are prohibited by statute from taking credit cards at all. So lottery is 100% cash or debit card. And we're just now stepping into the debit card through the Vermont Lottery. Agents have always had the option to take debit cards if they choose to. We now have vending machines that take debit cards, and that's new for the Vermont Lottery. But it is, if you want to think of a debit card as cash, it is a cash business.
Yeah, so just wanted to make crystal clear for everybody on the committee. So we've talked about both liquor, we've talked about lottery, but the key question that I want to just make sure that we got for everybody was that lottery sales, gaming sales are entirely cash, but it's cash and debit, which is considered cash for purposes, whereas a credit card is not a legal way to purchase any of the gaming products sold by the Vermont Lottery. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks. There was a little bit.
That's correct.
What? Just want to make sure
Correct.
everybody's on the same page.
Cash only.
Well, I think that exists at the sales level too, because I've been told it's cash only. Recently. So
On the lottery, correct.
not debit.
Debit is considered cash, so debit is,
Because it's your bank account, you're not being extended credit for the purchase.
I'm saying use of the card was not allowed.
So that's a choice by the vendor, is what Danielle
correct.
just told us?
That's what Danielle just said.
So maybe that particular retailer who's an agent isn't allowing the ATM card, debit card to be used.
That's correct. We have many agents that do not accept debit still at this point.
Representative Hooper of Randolph.
What exactly is the logic behind that? Like, why would certain vendors not accept debit cards? And why would we provide them the option?
so some do not accept debit, or this is my understanding of why they wouldn't accept debit. It's a little different on their accounting side. And through our terminal, there is not, so we have vending machines that they do accept a debit card. Through our terminal is not hooked to a store's back office or a POS system. So it's two different tenders, and it's a lot easier for agents to keep cash separate than debit separate. So tickets on the lottery side, instant tickets are on a commission basis. So they're set up with parameters, and each store has a different set of parameters of settling on a days or a percentage active. So I think a lot of agents choose not to take debit because it's a lot easier on their accounting side, that they can keep their lottery cash separate from all other business because our terminal doesn't go into their POS systems. That's what we've heard from agents, the majority of agents.
Thank you, Danielle. Understood.
Sure.
And while we wouldn't mandate that these independent businesses accept debit cards, we are in the process of, encouraging them to accept debit cards and increasing the number of vending machines so the players can use the debit cards.
So I'll take one more question from Representative Morgan, and then we've got 15, 20 minutes left in our morning presentation, and I want to give the commissioner time to talk about some legislative priorities. So
Just real quick, I tied to that. I don't know on debit cards, but credit cards vendors get charged a percentage of utilization of them. Is there an issue with that with debit cards too? I don't know how a debit card, if it's the same relationship. You know what I'm saying, Danielle?
Is there a processing fee for debit cards, Danielle?
I think there is.
There is, and our vendor actually takes care of that piece.
That's what I mean.
Our
So they may be
agents do not
reluctant.
pay. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that might be some of the reluctance. They don't want to pay that fee. And I could understand that.
Right, and they don't on the debit card. That is one of the, I'm sorry, on the vending machines. That is one thing that when we set this up, we wanted to bring that cost to us at this point, to our vendor at this point. So the agents do not get charged a fee.
Thank you.
Okay, talk about our legislative priorities for this year. Number one priority for the department and the administration is the passage of sports betting. If you've been following the conversation around sports betting, last year in Senate Economic Development, I worked very closely with the chair at the time, Senator Sorokin, as well as Tucker, to develop draft language around sports betting. Happy to share that with you so you have that frame of reference. We essentially, in my view, the committee ran out of time. There was a piece of legislation that they put in the Sports Betting Study Committee. Representative Byrong and I were both on that committee. It was comprised of legislators, the executive branch, Secretary of State's office, and the AG's office. We met over, I guess it was September, October, November. There's a sports betting study report. I can share that with you as well. And that makes recommendations to the General Assembly around sports betting. Happy to talk with you, in more detail, but basically the committee in general said we definitely need to, recommending that the General Assembly pass sports betting. So the question wasn't if, but how. And then our work kind of followed from the how. And then we had the people come in that were operators or problem gambling experts or other states to help us, navigate that how. Basically, the committee recommended that the Department of Liquor and Lottery, that there be one primary authority, and that would be the Liquor and Lottery Department, with the caveat that problem gambling and the problem gambling fund that the recommendation came through is that would be the purview of the Department of Mental Health. The committee also recommended that the way we establish operators is through a competitive bid process that the Department of Liquor and Lottery would oversee. And this committee wanted to see competition, but didn't want to put it the number necessarily in statute, so recommended anywhere from 2 to 6 operators, given that Vermont is such a small market, and the revenue share would be determined through that competitive bid process. And we've seen New Hampshire and New York make significant amount of money as a result of doing that revenue share through a competitive bid process. Lots of other details around problem gambling. I think we spent the most amount of time talking about responsible gaming and problem gambling, and have a number of provisions for, the ability for self-exclusion, what the operator responsibilities are for problem gambling, and then what the state's responsibility are. I know we'll have a lot more conversations about sports betting.
So I'd want to limit conversations to process and sort of overall. I do not want to get into, we do not have time for a more detailed conversation. I am committed to making the time on our agenda to hear a full presentation of the report and take testimony from relevant folks and hear from Vermonters and obviously the department about their recommendations on the online sports betting and that proposal. So we definitely are going to get to this. So I want to make that very clear to everyone, but I just don't think we can do it in 10 minutes. So Jay, if you have a clarifying question or question about process, I just want to be careful.
Or just grab me later, if you have questions.
Yeah, we will definitely hear more from the commissioner and the department about, I know that I have to tell you, I've heard more buzz in this building about this particular issue than practically anything else that's in our jurisdiction, which somewhat boggles my mind given the fact that, we just had some pretty major election stuff and a number of other things that.
But I want the past to cover.
Yeah, but it's pretty clear that folks have an interest in this particular issue. So we will be getting to it.
Absolutely. And I think for us, the number one reason to pass sports betting is for the consumer protections, because right now there's an illegal, illicit market, and there are no consumer protections. If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the liquor side and some of the priorities that we have. One thing from last session, well, two things from last session is fortified wines and vermouths. You heard from Tucker, they're currently distributed through 802 Spirits. We think that there's an argument to be made to have those fortified wines and vermouths distributed in the private sector. Part of that is because a lot of the bars and the restaurants use those products for their cocktail programs. We have a limited availability because we are a control state and we have such a small warehouse. We think there's no public safety issue with those fortified wines. That's, think about your Amaros, your ports, your sherries, to be distributed in the grocery stores and convenience stores, and a lot of other control states, I think 9 other control states, fortified wines and vermouths are distributed in the private sector. We have such a small warehouse and our stores are very small. I think we need to be really strategic about the types of products that we're selling through the 802 Spirit store. And that was a lot of the impetus behind wanting to have the low ABV, ready to drink cocktails distributed in the grocery stores and the convenience stores. The other is consumer choice, right? We have a cocktail sort of culture in Vermont. We have a lot of bars and restaurants and resorts that cater to the tourists. They come from New York or California or Texas and Boston. They're used to having these products. Our bars and restaurants and resorts want to have good cocktail menus. And if we are limiting the availability of these types of products, it's not really helpful. So we would like to see fortified wines and vermouths distributed in the private sector. The other thing we would like to see is the expansion of the farmers markets permits. Right now, if you are a manufacturer, Vermont manufacturer of distilled spirits, you can get a 4th class license, which allows you to basically have a tasting room. In that 4th class license is the farmers market permits. A lot of the small Vermont distillers, that's how they reach their clients, right? That's how they reach their out-of-state tourists. That's how they develop brand awareness. And so right now we have a limit of 10. There's no rhyme or reason to that. We think that that should be expanded. So we would like to see an expansion of the farmers market permits. And then we have a few other minor technical corrections. There's a catering fee we'd like to see adjusted. They're two different catering fees with two different prices. That doesn't make sense. Let's reduce the higher ones so that there's some consistency there. We would like to see technical correction on the festival permits. We've kind of gone over this the last couple of years. We make a little tweak and then it inadvertently causes a problem. So we have a solution that will clarify the festival, we think, the festival permitting. And we have a few technical corrections on our statute that relate to board and commissioner responsibility. There's some outdated language or inaccuracies. The board does not submit, for example, a budget. I submit a budget to finance and management to the governor. So there's a few technical corrections there.
Any questions about that? My overarching question is that I think there are a couple of different vehicles. We should talk offline about what the timeline should be like around some of the issues that I think have a lot of public and policy interests, like the sports betting and then some of the technical cleanup. I believe it was traditional for there to be kind of a liquor and lottery housekeeping bill that Tucker would work with you and your staff on. And I would anticipate that will be fairly mundane, but something that is important that we need to get to. So we can definitely want to make sure that we're taking care of all of the business that we need to in order to keep things moving forward. Any questions for the commissioner about those legislative priorities of kind of overall? And we'll obviously have her and other folks from the department back.
I'm not sure if this is, thank you. So it sounds like one of your main priorities is to increase access to these products, alcohol products, and decrease the cost. Am I understanding that correctly?
When you're talking about like the fortified wines and vermouths, yes. So we would like to increase access and availability of those products. Part of the impetus behind wanting to have those distributed in the private system is then those the bar and restaurant can go to a wholesaler and can say, hey, I would like 10 different Amaros. We've seen in Maine when they took out fortified wines from their control, the availability of the products increased 50%. So part of that is increasing those products for the bars and the restaurants and the consumers. Sure. And then your other question was decreasing cost. Yes. On the business initiatives, we're definitely looking to, part of it is kind of almost like pandemic recovery. And that was kind of the thought behind. I mean, first of all, I just thought it was ridiculous that as a bar or restaurant, would go into an 802 Spirits store and shop the same way. As a businesswoman, that made no sense to me. So I've always felt that way. And then you come into, the pandemic and the bars and the restaurants are closed. And so we took it as an opportunity to give them a savings by making it easier, but also making it less expensive.
So yeah, understanding that procedural makes more sense from a business standpoint. How are you monitoring the impact on public health? Just thinking of any product that is cheaper and more accessible, and the impact on use in terms of.
So it would be a public safety issue. And Skylar, can you talk a little bit about we did a little analysis of the compliance and public safety and sort of our, minor, and I think we had a report that we can share or update, looking at the types of products that minors are attempting to buy. And, no surprise, it's beer. They're not looking to buy sherry, for example. But
Bud Light was the big hit.
Yeah. But Skylar, do you want to talk about the department's view on that fortified wine expansion and public safety?
Absolutely, Commissioner. I will say, to your point, yes, we've done analysis on the types of products that minors have attempted to purchase during our compliance program, and where they get the most success is with beers and more age, I guess you could say, age appropriate beverage alcohol that they attempt to purchase. It just raises more eyebrows when it's an esoteric product being purchased by a young looking person. But however, I will say, in response to these legislative changes, our compliance program is reflexive, and we are interested in seeing what sorts of impact these changes make. A perfect example is, RTDs being moved being separated out in its own definition and privatized. In response to that, we have prioritized the attempted purchase by our minors for our compliance program of those RTD beverages. So we do want to gauge what this compliance looks like out in the field, and that's the chief reason for our minor compliance program. And we're always happy and transparent to share those results with you. And we would anticipate should a similar change happen with fortified wines, we would respond in the same way. We would attempt to increase the level of attempted buys of fortified wines by minors to address the acute, minor access issues.
In this change, do you scoop high-level things like cognac and things like that into that same
Cognac is a cordial.
terms?
Exactly. And we can give you information on the categories and what's included in that. Yep.
Any last questions for the commissioner for this morning? Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And for your team for being with us. I look forward to seeing you again and doing some work with you this session. We will break for this morning. We are scheduled at 10:45 to take some time